On tap today, we have Jarrod Alberich. How are you doing today, good sir?
All right, Aaron. Thanks for having me here. I am hungry, but I'm not a trilobite, so hopefully this will work out.
Well, okay, now, are you old?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're a fossil, like
Okay.
me.
All right.
And are you a cute, cuddly critter?
Some say it is so.
Okay, so you are at least trilobite adjacent.
Okay. All right.
All
This is
right, all
gonna
right.
work.
And you and I got together over some mutual interest. And the funny thing is, we didn't even realize we had those mutual interests until quite a bit down the road.
Right. Right.
Because you are a very talented artist.
Oh, thank you.
You have a really neat concept that I like to recommend. You had called yourself the yard sale artist,
Mm-hmm.
where you will do sketches on books, pages
Yes.
from books, and you will also have a podcast.
Yes. I have a few podcasts floating around out there as well. Yes.
The one I'm most familiar with is on Her Majesty's Secret podcast.
Yes. Yes. On Her Majesty's Secret Podcast is our James Bond show for the White Rocket Entertainment Network, which was started by Van Plexico. And yeah, that's a fun little podcast because it's got a few shows on it, movie review shows. And then I'm mostly on two of them. I'm on Rogue Agents, which is myself, my brother Jason, my friend Delvin, my friend Pat. And it was originally called Rookie Agents because we took Delvin and Pat, who'd never seen the James Bond movies before. Jason and I took them through every single one. We did a review show on each one. And now that they've graduated and seen them all, we call ourselves Rogue Agents. And then we talk about anything and everything in the Bond world, from the comics to the games. We just did an episode on one of the short stories by Fleming. So yeah, that's what's going on over there on our Majesty's Secret Podcast. The other one I'm involved in was with Alan Porter, where we're doing the soundtracks of James Bond. And we're almost done. We're about to record the Skyfall episode soon. So
Wow.
We're almost out of soundtracks to discuss.
And it is amazing because when we talk about an extended universe, you think of Star Wars, which has movies and TV shows and comics, and then you think Star Trek, also very similar. But James Bond has an extended universe that I don't think is getting enough play yet.
I concur. And I think James Bond could extend its universe even more. But yeah, for now, I don't think enough people know about the wonderful comic book series from Dynamite Comics. They've done a great job with the James Bond comic book series. Very enjoyable. But yeah, there's definitely wells you can go to. As you know, Aaron, you've been on my ongoing documentary of James Bond in video games. And that's where we found we also had some crossover, that you like games and I like games. And so there's games, like you said, there's comics, novels, clearly bunches and bunches of novels. So yeah, there's an extended universe out there that you're right, is not as I don't know, spotlit as whatever the right word is, as Star Wars or Star Trek.
I am wondering if it's partially because maybe the fan base just doesn't grasp or doesn't gravitate toward extended universes as much as a Star Wars or a Star Trek. Is it just that James Bond has an older fan base as a whole, that they don't want to go to comics and games?
It could be because, like, you make a valid point, because like I said, I do the Music of Bond shows with Alan Porter, and he's older than us. And Alan's never dipped a toe into the video game universe, which has got a lot of really cool things to offer in it. But it could be very generational, because I podcast with my brother Jason. He's only 5 years older than me, but that 5 years is really a generational split for gaming in particular, because Jason kind of likes to game, but it never grabbed him like it did me. And he's just 5 years older. He's a tabletop, roll the dice board game guy, and I'm the video game guy. So I do think there is some truth to that, Aaron. I think you may be right that it could be just a generational thing, that people don't get into the extended universe of Bond as much. And then, like I said, I do think it's a little bit on the fault of the Bond ownership, which I guess is Barbara and Michael. They own the property. They haven't really pushed things that they could push. I mean, I was on a panel for SpyCon this last year, virtual, of course, but we discussed that. We discussed how there's missed opportunities Uh, why doesn't James Bond have a Netflix show? Or even if you didn't want it to be Bond, why not? Why doesn't Felix Leiter have a Netflix show?
That would be
Or
awesome.
yeah, and my pitch was a James Bond Netflix show that would be animated and done in a 60s style. So it would be all retro Bond. And then the wonderful thing about that is you could grab some of the older Bond actors, like let's say Timothy Dalton, and he could do the voice work for Bond. And how cool would that be? And we'd all tune in for it. And I think we'd grab a new generation of these younger kids. I guess they're kids to us, aren't they? They are watching Netflix and being like, this James Bond animated show is really cool. Then you go, well, son, let me show you this movie catalog. Let me show you all these novels. So I do think there are missed opportunities for Bond, but you never know. You never know. You know, just so I can run my mouth more. You've got me thinking about sort of Star Trek and Star Wars. They definitely lend themselves to a bigger universe, no pun intended, but they have literally a bigger universe.
True.
You know, Bond is a secret agent going out doing secret agent things. He's right here on Earth. And you know, well, except a Moonraker, but he's right here on Earth. So I guess the universe is a little smaller, but there is a lot you could do with it. I mean, if you look at the Dynamite comics, they've done a couple of M comics and a Moneypenny comic, and these are characters that could spin off into their own worlds easily.
I could absolutely see that, and I definitely agree that there are some opportunities for an animated series to be set as a period piece, because even in as far back as the 90s, I was hearing people saying that James Bond should be a period piece because that resolves a lot of the problems we have with moving him into the 21st century. Is that there are certain complications that just don't exist if you accept that this is the 60s, 70s, early 80s, and that's where you leave it.
Absolutely. In fact, on that same panel I was on, I want to give credit where it's due. I think it was Van Plexico, and one of his ideas was, and I adore this idea, one of the problems with the Bond movie franchise right now is, you know, for a long time there, it was a wonderful little schedule. It was like basically every 2 years you were getting a Bond movie. And then it became, you know, we had that big break between Dalton and Brosnan. That was a 6-year break while they fixed some stuff contract wise, whatnot. And then Craig comes along and it starts to, you know, 5 years between them, 6 years between, and that starts to become the norm. And some Bond fans are frustrated by that. So here's Van's idea, which is going to go back to what you were saying, Aaron. What if there was 2 production companies? What if the Bond people, you know, Barbara and Michael said, we're going to have two production teams, and each one of you is going to be working on a Bond movie. Team 1, you're going to make a retro Bond movie. It's going to take place in the 60s, or the 70s, or the 80s. Team 2, you're going to make a modern one. And you each have 4 years to get yours out, but we're going to offset them. So you get a retro Bond every 2 years, and then a modern Bond every 2 years, and a retro Bond. And I was like, that's a brilliant idea.
That is.
I wish they would do that. 2 different actors, 2 different production teams, 2 different directors. You know, you get a different flavor and style every 2 years. You go, well, I'm going to watch a retro Bond, then I'm going to watch a modern Bond. And what a wonderful plan. I hope Barbara and Michael listen to your show.
Hey, I really do too. And hey, if you're available, call me. But one thing I'd like to talk about a retro Bond, one of the few examples I can think of was the Xbox game From Russia with Love.
Yes.
Which I wish they had done more from that, because that to me was the best idea for a Bond game possibly ever. If it may not have been the best Bond game, I'd put it in my top 5 for sure. But to actually be able to remake an old movie with a new concept as a video game and have the freedom to explore areas you couldn't explore in the movie, well, to me, it was very compelling. It was actually probably the reason I bought an Xbox back in the day.
Yeah, you're gonna have to refresh my memory, Aaron, because right now, like as in last night, I was slowly working through all my interviews that I do for my Bond video game documentary, and I'm in that era now. I'm in the 2000 to 2010 era of the games. And did I interview you for that one? Were you my interview for Rush with Love?
No, you were not. I believe you had somebody else for that. We talked about GoldenEye Rogue Agent, another game I like.
Yes,
and possibly I would probably put that as my number 2 Bond game ever.
Oh, its storyline is incredible.
Yes,
but yeah, to go back to what you were saying, that, you know, to do From Rush with Love, you know, with the Sean Connery voice work, as a video game was brilliant. And you know what? I think a game that is unfairly judged, and I still can't figure out why, because I played it, enjoyed it, is 007 Legends did the same thing.
Mhm.
If you've never tried 007 Legends, or if your listeners haven't, what an awesome concept, because it starts out as Skyfall. When he's on the train, he gets shot by Moneypenny off the train, and as he's falling, he starts having these memories of his past, and that's
Mhm.
what you play through. You play through Goldfinger on Her Majesty's Secret Service, Die Another Day, License to Kill. You get to play through all these memories as Daniel Craig, as James Bond. So you get to play Daniel Craig in Goldfinger and Daniel Craig in Her Majesty's Secret Service. And I'm like, this is brilliantly creative. What a wonderful idea.
So you like the game?
Absolutely did.
Okay.
I see it catches flack, and I to this day don't know why. I truly enjoyed it. And I don't know, maybe I'm just like the world's most forgiving video game player, but I was like, wonderful concept, had fun playing it. Don't get why it catches crap.
Well, I had only heard that it was very buggy. So, and that's really,
I
if you can
didn't
say that.
I didn't encounter any bugs that I can think of. Although I will admit there is a stealth action part during the License to Kill portion of it that I just got stuck on. Like I just could not get through this room. And it was one of those things where I was like, well, I'm not going to sit here and get mad. And I probably got away from it for a few weeks, maybe even a couple months. And then when I came back to it, it went just fine. I don't know, that could have been a bug or not, but I didn't really experience any real issues, and I had a blast with it. But yeah, that's all I got, man.
All right. Well, I got to look that up then, because that was one of those games when I first got my Wii U. I really wanted to get that. And I heard, like you said, terrible reviews, not necessarily from the idea, but just they said it was unplayably buggy, which that's a very overused statement by far.
Oh, okay. Well, I
But
did not experience that. I played it on, I think I played it on my PS3 is where and I do have it on my Wii U, but I think I beat it on PS3, and then I scored it at a surprise yard sale for my Wii U. And since I already beat it, I didn't really play it. I just added it to the collection. But I don't know if it's buggier on one system or another. But again, my experience with it was good, and what an amazing concept. And just to go back to what you were saying, Aaron, I mean, who amongst us wouldn't play, Octopussy on our PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5, and I'm just picking a movie at random, but let's just think about that. You'd start off flying an acrojet, and then and then you'd have a fight on a train, and I mean, who wouldn't do that? That would be awesome.
to kind of, that's a great segue into what I was thinking of a little while ago. When we're talking about an extended universe, especially in the video game realm, I was looking at your podcast and the series that you're doing on the Bond video games, and I asked myself, at what point did these games deserve to be called an extended universe? Because that's a pretty recent thing. And I generously want to say it happened with GoldenEye 64, but realistically, it's more like the PS2 era, the Xbox era, where they actually got good enough to say, okay, this is Bond games are worth looking forward to.
Yes. And had original stories, weren't based off of previous movies. Which is ironic, because the very, 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 very first James Bond game had original story. It was one of those text-based adventures for the ZX Spectrum. It's almost impossibly hard to find, because some dude in England named Richard Shepard basically made it out of his garage. But anyway, I digress. I'll sit here and give you factoids on video games all day, since that's what I've been working on for the last year. But I agree with you. I think the extended universe really does blow up in the PS2 era, because then you got like Nightfire, Everything or Nothing, Agent Under Fire, and they all had original stories and original characters. And one of my favorite things, they all had original Bond theme songs. So there's like this whole underground layer of cool theme songs that you can hear that for James Bond that a lot of people don't know exist.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point where you start to say, okay, like I said, these are worth looking forward to. It's an expansion onto the universe, like Star Wars had Shadows of the Empire, for one thing, which was like, okay, it's set between the two movies. There are new characters that you can actually build up and care about, and you don't know who's going to still make it to the end of the story. So there's not that, oh my God, well, Obi-Wan Kenobi's going to make it to the next movie, so who cares? You don't have that.
Yes, true enough. Yeah. So it's a good comparison with Star Wars having original games. That's an excellent comparison as James Bond got original games with new characters. And it kind of goes back to you're big on GoldenEye Rogue Agent, which is a game I own, but I've actually never played. You'd think the video game documentary guy would have played it yet, but I haven't. But I've done enough research to know it has an incredibly smart storyline.
It does.
Like an incredibly smart storyline. And you told me about that too when I interviewed you, and you'll be on the upcoming episode for that. But for the listeners who don't know, I mean, you don't play as James Bond. You play as this rogue agent who has been recruited by, is it Goldfinger? To basically kill Dr. No. Like you're in the dark side of the espionage industry. You know better than me, Aaron, because I can't remember. Do you play a former British agent?
Yes.
A former 00, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay. What a cool concept, you know?
It really is. Like I was saying to you during the discussion we had, the big issue with the story, and I don't think it's an issue, but I can totally see why somebody else would, is that it's completely incompatible with the James Bond canon. Whether that's the movie canon, whether it's the game canon, the story is such that you cannot fit it into any other story. You have to accept it on its own terms.
I see.
If you get your head around that, it's great. But I can see why somebody would say, I can't do anything with this. So no.
Well, it shouldn't be that hard for a big Bond fan to do that, because let's be honest, continuity has always been a little wah when it comes to James Bond. Anyway, you kind of have to take them all individually. To me, really, the only true continuity we've ever seen throughout, like, just the film series is every once in a while come up that he was married to Tracy and she was the real love, and her death is why he is the way he is. That's why he doesn't get, women can't get close to him anymore. You know, that's really the only backstory. You know, these recent movies, they tried to give it some backstory. Oh, you know, this was his foster brother and all that jazz. And most of the Bond community rejects that, because the great thing about James Bond is he doesn't need an origin. You know, you got a character like Batman, you have to explain why a man puts on a bat suit and goes out and fights crime. And James Bond, it is literally his day job. It's literally on his tax forms, you know. I'm a government agent. He probably doesn't put government agent on his tax forms. He probably puts you know, importer, exporter, or maybe he still uses his naval rank. I don't know. But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You don't need an origin story. So you don't need it. For me, and probably you too, it sounds like we don't need a ton of continuity. We can take a game like Rogue Agent and just enjoy it, because Bond has always been loosey-goosey with his continuity in the film series.
Yes. And you know, as we've kind of hinted at before, it's, you get to a certain point after so many decades where you can't really make a strong connection between one series and another series, because people just age, and you can't expect a guy who was fighting Dr. No in the early 60s to still be running around on satellites in the late 90s. I'm sorry, that the body doesn't tolerate that.
Yeah, the irony is in the literary Bond, I think Fleming outlined that all double O's had mandatory retirement. I can't remember if it was 40 or 45 was mandatory retirement in the literary Ian Fleming created universe. And like all of your Bond actors are about that age when they start playing the character. So yeah, to your point, it's, you know, you have to let a lot of it go. You have to realize it's basically, you just have to take the essence of this character and put him into this time period, whether it's the early 60s or whether he's wearing bell bottoms and Live and Let Die, or, you know, he's fighting Alec Trevelyan on a satellite dish, like, you know, in GoldenEye, which is an awesome fight, by the way, but don't get me down that rabbit hole.
And I think that is a strength of it. It's a character that can manifest itself in almost any time period, because the essence does fit pretty well. I mean, we've always had espionage, we've always had secrets, we've always had the idea that the world is not being run by the people we think it's being run by. That translates.
Yes. And you said something earlier too, that's, you know, true. Like the whole, you know, sort of definition of core of James Bond, and that he's a killer, and he's you know, not politically correct, you know, with the ladies and whatnot for this era, you know, that we all have to remember that it's escapism, the fantasy, and it's not real. But that almost, I think, starts to play in his favor as we move towards a more PC culture, because it makes him an interesting character. I mean, at the end of the day, what people have to remember, I think people outside the James Bond franchise don't realize, is I think people who are just kind of tangentially familiar with those, like, oh, he's kind of like a superhero. And in the 80s with Roger Moore, they kind of made him a superhero-ish character. But in his core, from the books and from the core of James Bond, he's just a bastard, man. You're not even necessarily supposed to like him, based off of how Fleming wrote him. I mean, he has a cruel smile, and a cruel mouth is a phrase that Fleming used all the time. He's he's not supposed to be lovable,
No.
but Hollywood's kind of made him that, and I think that's why you get a lot of these mixed messages now of like, does he fit into PC times? Well, no, and that's kind of what makes him interesting. So I'll be interested to see as we move forward in these upcoming films, how they tackle that. I kind of hope they hang a lantern on it, just run at it full arms and embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you and I both know who did. James Bond got called out in 1995 by James Judi Dench's M. She called him a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, and she wasn't wrong. That's who he is.
And then later on, in a couple movies later, it's like they have a decent working relationship, but he hasn't changed who he is.
No, but he's, the one thing about him is he fundamentally, he is who he is, but he's, like he's kind of a bastard, but he's not a straight up a-hole. Like he knows how to curtail his behavior and how to act around him and how to be respectful. He knows how to do it, but he is who he is,
And just like the line from The Living Daylights where he says, "I only kill professionals."
Yeah.
I mean, it's like that's the line he draws. It might not be the best line, but I had an argument with a very good friend of mine a very long time ago, and the subject was, is James Bond a glorified assassin, or is there more to his job title than that? And we went back and forth on this, and the specifics don't matter, but that was really what I had to think about. And because this guy gets recruited to do, basically to take out these people who are too powerful. And that's not necessarily the job you want to give to the most respectable person out there.
I'm going to have to agree with you on that. And this is going to be a nice segue, as I guess I hijack your show, but a nice segue into what makes a great Bond actor. And I'm going to tell you who mine is. And I'm going to ask you who yours is as I finish my stupid diatribe here. But my favorite actor in the Bond canon is Timothy Dalton. And it goes back to what you were saying. I mean, if you are familiar with literary Bond, you're right. He is basically a glorified assassin. And so what I think about when I look at my actor is I say, okay, thanks to the big screen, he's really two things now. He's a gentleman spy who can use his charm to get what he needs. And he's also an assassin, a cold-blooded killer. So when I look at an actor, I have to say, is this person charming enough to be able to woo the lovely lady? And can I see him back behind the restaurant by the dumpster slitting a guy's throat, because that's what he's there to do? Timothy Dalton, yes. Roger Moore, no. Roger Moore, absolutely gentleman spy, but could you see him slitting a guy's throat behind a building? No. So that's the balance I look for, and I'll turn that to you. And that's just my criteria. I'd be interested in what your criteria is and who your favorite Bond is.
I have to be transparent in that I've already said on the show I am a huge Timothy Dalton fan.
That's why we get along so well.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you on that. I have been on a Daniel Craig kick for quite some time because I've been enjoying that run of movies, some more than others, but they gel very well with me.
He's done Craig is interesting because, well, he fits my criteria of being able to be charming and be an assassin. His movies are not as, I don't think they're as fun as the things we've seen before, but like you said, there's a certain gel there. Like the Craig era is its own universe. Like the era before is almost like you could connect them all, but then it's like, okay, cut that off, and the Craig era is its own universe. So I can see where you would get into that.
My description of James Bond, and the assassin thing still works in just fine. I'm not trying to disagree with that. But what I see is he is the world's most resourceful person.
Nice. I
His
like that.
his job description is not necessarily to do the killing, although that's probably going to be the bulk of it.
Mhm.
But because he can get himself to the place he needs to be, he can find the means to get the job done when somebody else would probably fail on that.
That's an excellent point. I like that.
And for that reason, although he's not the one that I go to, I do like Lazenby a lot.
Oh, no problem with that. No,
Yeah,
Lazenby did great. Yeah, no problem at
because
all.
yeah, when he's trying to get down the wire in the middle of the blizzard and he reaches into his pockets, rips out the lining, and makes himself a pair of mittens, that's James Bond to me.
Mhm.
That's right there, him doing what he does best. And so, really, I just like that.
Yeah, the little spycraft things, the little problem-solving things have always been great.
Yeah.
I saw somebody on Twitter just yesterday or the day before who kind of said that same thing. He said he's watching Dr. No, and he watched him do the little talcum powder on the briefcase thing and the little pluck a hair out and put it on the closet thing so he can see if anything's been messed with. And they're, what the point they're trying to make is that spycraft is cooler than any gadget he's ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, it's apples and oranges because I love gadgets too. But to the point, that is wonderfully intriguing stuff because we all remember it. And it's all very simple. Tear the pockets out, put the hair on the door, talcum powder on the thing, the tape recorder in Thunderball where he's listening so he can kind of almost visualize what happened while he was gone and that the guy is still in his room. Just that kind of stuff is super cool. So I agree with you.
Yeah. So to spin off of that for a minute, I mean, because we could talk Bond all day and we probably should take that opportunity sometime.
Is that not what we're doing?
But then you talk about the James Bond books so much, and you've had a little side gig as creating these sketches as a comic artist on pages of not just James Bond books, but other books as well. And I love this gig.
Thank you.
Like, for example, I got a commission from you. It's a Casino Royale with a Daniel Craig sketch. And yeah, you've done a few of those, I'm sure.
I have. I did another one just yesterday. I don't know if you saw me tweet about it. It was yesterday. I did another Craig. I think same pose as yours. I just played with the color scheme a little bit. I made it a little darker. But yeah, as the yard sale artist, as you mentioned before, I like to go to yard sales, library. I got a good relationship with my local libraries. They give me their discard books that I want. Or if you have a Second and Charles store where you live, they often will have a free bin out front of stuff they're just trying to get rid of. And that's what I look for because I'm really looking for damaged books because I don't like to damage a perfectly good book. I like to find a book that's already on its last leg and it's headed for the landfill, and then I pull out the good pages and I draw characters from the book on the book. So like you said, I did a Daniel Craig on Casino Royale. I've done every Bond actor on a page of a Bond book, mainly thanks to our friends over at the 00 Files. Donnie Z over there commissioned me to do one actor on every actor on a page. But yeah, like I said, it's not limited to Bond. I did Batman, and I'm in the middle of doing a project where I'm drawing some of the Avengers, not the superheroes, but the British TV show Avengers. I found a novel for that. I just did a Frankenstein on Frankenstein last night. And yeah, that's kind of a fun thing. It's a very yard sale artist thing. People tend to enjoy it. So I'm glad you do. And I appreciate you bringing it up. Let me plug it here.
Well, the visuals are just amazing on that. You get this really great payoff of the character juxtaposed against the text. And as somebody, I have a personal problem defacing books or damaging books. And I appreciate that you deliberately pick books that are already on the scrap heap.
Yes.
So props to you there. But how did you come up with this concept?
Okay. I have to give a good amount of credit to my colorist. I also write comics, as you know. And I've written a comic called Hamilton versus Burrow Werewolf Tale. And I actually inked a comic for Van Plexico called Cold Lightning. And I have another comic in the process. Anyway, the colorist I work with, his name is Ace Wheely. And Ace and I live relatively close to each other. So we were both at the same convention. pushing Hamilton versus Burrow Werewolf Tale together down in Florida. And his mom, she's a very creative, and she makes paper mache stuff. And what she was doing was making paper mache items. Just let me just give you an example. She like made a paper mache sorting hat from Harry Potter out of pages from a Harry Potter book. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. That's really clever and unique. And I thought, well, I got a couple of these busted James Bond books. It all did start with James Bond. And I just couldn't bring myself to throw them away because they're like the old vintage paperbacks, but the pages were falling out and the spine was complete. The glue had dried and cracked, and I bring myself to throw them out. And I was always thinking, so I started thinking, well, what could I, maybe a project I could give to her to make me something on these Bond books. And then it just clicked. I was like, well, Jarrod, why don't you just draw James Bond characters on these books? So I did a few of those, and people tended to like them. And so when I was out doing my yard sailing or at my library book sale, which I go to 3 or 4 times a year, I said, oh, here's a Spider-Man book and its spine is busted. And I'm like, well, let me draw Spider-Man on that. And then I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years now. So, I mean, just, you can't see it off camera, but just looking around, I've got books, just stacks and stacks and stacks. I got books here that I found and discard bins, hardcovers all up and down here. I slowly just find these things over time, draw the characters on them, and it's a lot of fun. And like you said, people tend to enjoy it.
I love the connection to the yard sale for both your podcast and this, mostly because how much do you get into old video games aside from James Bond?
A ton.
Okay.
I have literally, no joke, literally thousands of games out in my man cave. 99.9% yard sale acquired.
Gotcha.
If I see video games at the yard sale and they're not ridiculously priced, I'm picking them up.
All right. I see. Now you and I relate on that quite a bit, mostly because I've always been into games since, when I first got my original NES, that was kind of the start of it. But I never stopped buying anything I ever started buying. So even when that was retired, I would still buy those games at yard sales to an extent. People clearing out their inventories at eBay. I would just keep buying anything that I still liked.
Right. Same.
And there's a lot of people that, especially like us, that were in that hobby, that they were just yard sailing, garage sailing, antiquing, trying to get those old games until about 2010, 12, when eBay just sucked all the air out of that room and you couldn't find anything if you went out. Was that your experience? Did you just find a point when it wasn't worth looking for video games anymore?
Actually, no, but I do believe that I live in one of the most fertile areas for yard sailing. I still have a fair amount of success finding games. Of course, the further you get from as the years go by, like we both started in earnest on the original Nintendo. So yes, it is fewer and farther between that I find original Nintendo games at yard sales now, but they still do pop up from time to time. Like I said, I live in a really good area for that because I live in rural Alabama. There's not a lot of people on the eBay scene. You couple that with that I live in a military community. I live just outside of an army base. So there's constant turnover, people moving, coming in, coming out, coming in and coming out, which means they like to have a lot of yard sales. So I get a lot of turnover and not a ton of competition down here for that kind of thing. Because I do sell stuff on eBay myself because it's a hobby that pays for itself. I'll buy, like I said, I'll buy the whole stack. Chances are I already have 5 or 6 games in the stack. So I'll take those and I'll flip them on eBay and I'll make more money than I spent on on the stack, But no, I've been really fortunate in that this area I live in seems to be real fertile for it. It's remained fertile. So I have that luxury of having a good location for yard sailing. And I go out like literally every Saturday. And if you follow me on Twitter, that usually like around Mondays and sometimes Thursdays and Fridays, I'll make a Goodwill run to my Goodwill, my Christian mission, and I'm always finding cool stuff. And I post it on about it. # yard sale adventures. If it becomes a book page sketch, then # book page sketch, and I will find exciting stuff. So I am blessed, I think, with where I live and the turnover rate.
Awesome. Okay, well, I am very glad to hear that because your experience is it's the minority, but it's still encouraging to know that that's still out there. People used to talk about the thrill of the hunt, and
Yes.
I get behind that. What else do you look for that might not be gaming or Bond related or even book related?
Okay. My other big wheelhouse is toys. I
Mhm.
deal a lot in toys. My big preference is I'm a GI Joe collector, a 3 3/4 inch, as you would probably, or I get the feeling you and I are very much the same age.
Mhm.
Starting on Nintendo, you probably loved GI Joe as a kid too. My wife, her thing growing up was He-Man and She-Ra, so
Mhm.
we're always on the lookout for He-Man, She-Ra's, GI Joes. And much like the games of the Nintendo, they do fewer and farther between as you get further from it, but we still find them. So toys is a big one. So we mainly focus on toys, video games. Of course, we mentioned the books, and after that, it's just any kind of interesting oddities that I that I've come across. But that's our core is toys and games.
I think that our generation is going to be very unique in the GI Joe department because we are one of the few that actually appreciate the 3 3/4 inch line.
Oh yes.
Whereas it seems like everybody who's older than us or younger than us just thinks that it's the 12-inch figures and everything else was garbage.
I guess yeah, definitely the people older than us. I actually found a 12-inch Joe with a bunch of accessories at a yard sale locally not too long ago, like a vintage one, and I couldn't believe it because you don't ever see those pop up anymore.
No.
Um, but yeah, I also had just this last week, I stopped by my Christian mission, and they had a GI Joe 3 3/4 inch play set. It was the Conquest of Cobra Mountain or something like that. It had come out in about 2002, 2003. And what blew me away is when I saw it in the store, I was like, wow, GI Joe stuff. And then it clicked. I was like, I've never seen this before in my life. I'm a Joe collector and I've never even seen this set before. And they only wanted $10 for it. So of course I picked it up.
Nice.
But that stuff, yeah, it's out there. And man, I've pieced together a gigantic 3 3/4 inch GI Joe collection I've been doing this for 20 years now, and never gonna stop. But it is harder to find. They're fewer and farther between now, which makes me a little sad. But you know what you would appreciate is I have a true collection of. Trying loosely. I'm on a mission. Will it ever be successful or not? I don't know. To get all the original NES cartridges, and I think there
Okay.
was about 800 of them. I have the actual number and the whole list written down somewhere. I think it's like 700 and something
Mhm.
original carts. And over the 20 years of yard sailing, I have about almost 500 of them now. So I
Nice.
still find them every once in a while at yard sales and add to
I
that
had
collection.
originally been on the exact same quest because when I first really got into it, when the prices dropped to the bottom, it's like I can get everything. I wanted to get everything because I thought I'm the only person on earth who appreciates this thing. And I have to make sure somebody has all these games. And then as I, did some searching on the internet and collecting picked up, I realized, okay, some people have made full sets. So I personally don't need to do this anymore. And that's when the prices for some of the big ticket items got really, really big. And I said, I need to put that attention towards something else. So I did.
I understand, and I have a pretty firm rule. Like I'm not buying any games to complete my set off of eBay. Like it has to be found in the wild. I
Mhm.
have to find it at a yard sale or a thrift store or flea market. Have that's the rule.
Mhm.
Very rarely to ever break that rule. Like I think the only time I ever did was for my wife. She's the biggest Dragon Warrior Dragon Quest fan you've ever met. And I think I ended up ordering Dragon Warrior 3 and 4 off of eBay for her for Christmas one year. But that's about I think that's the only rule break I ever did on that.
I don't really care where I get it from, but there's a certain point at which I'm just not spending
Yeah.
triple digits. I mean, I'll
Yeah.
spend 1 or 200 if it's something I really want. Like I have a big appreciation for the weird wisdom tree color dreams games.
Yes.
I
Yes.
like those. They're not super expensive, so I'll drop $1 on that. I want the Panesian games. I will spend something for them. I'm not spending what they're charging now.
Mm.
So I mean, I will go halfway on some of them.
Yeah, I there are some things I would hedge as well. Like I would when I say I want the whole set, there's those ones that's like the gold cart from the tournament or
Uh-huh.
and I'm like, That's not that important to me. I just want like the core, what was available to the general public core set is, well, I'd be very happy with that. And then, like I said, I'm over halfway. It's not something that I have this burning thing about, but you know, whenever I spy that stack of those perfectly squared up gray cartridges at a yard sale.
Do you consider stadium events to be significant?
I know of it. I know it has a significance, but you know, if I find it or don't find it, I'm not losing sleep.
Sure. I struggle on that because it's stadium events really seems to be a modern story. Nobody really cared about this game until it got big, and it's like, but it's world-class track meet. It with a different title screen.
That is an oddity. That's for sure. I do have to tell you this, so you're gonna like this. It just when I was living in Montgomery, which actually you would think a bigger city in Alabama like Montgomery would have. I was really excited when I moved there when I was in the Air Force, because I was like, oh, it's, you know, yard sale heaven in this giant city, and it was one of the worst places I ever got for yard sailing. Again, I think it has a lot to do with not a ton of turnover. I think turnover is important, but anyway, I go to this yard sale, and this lady's got probably 40 or 50 Nintendo cartridges sitting on this table, just kind of spread out. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go, you know? And I do I'm going to help your listeners out now with the yard sale technique. What you do is, if you see especially a big lot of, 20, 30, 40, doesn't matter. You pick up one and you say, how much are Nintendo games, right? I'm teaching you guys technique now. Pick up one. How much are Nintendo games? And then they generally will say, oh, you know, I want $2 a piece for them, right? And then you go, well, what if I got 10? You know, and then they'll go, well, I can do $8. And then you do the Cobra strike. You go, all right, how much for all of them? And then they'll knock the price down even more. So it's a good bargaining tool. You start with one, then ask about 5 or 10, and then just, what do you want for the whole thing? And that's a good way to get the price down fast. So I walk up with this strategy in mind, right? I see all these, I probably got 40 or 50 of them. I walk up with this strategy in mind, and I'm like, ma'am, how much? I pick up the one. How much are Nintendo games? Without blinking, she looks at me and she goes, 10 cents. So immediately I was like, well, I'm not even going to try this whole bargain. I was like, yes, ma'am, all day long. You know, here's your $5. Take $5. I'm taking all these games.
There is a certain point at which you don't haggle.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, I'm not haggling with this lady at all.
When you're only asking 10 cents, to ask a penny less is just being an asshole.
Exactly. You know, and it's funny because like some people I know like get frustrated with me at that story because they're like, you know, oh, you basically ripped that lady off. And I'm like, if you give them exactly what they're asking for, you're not ripping them off. It drives me nuts when I watch shows like American Pickers, and they tell how much you want for this old sign. The guy's like, give me $5. They're like, oh, that's worth $400. You should give you more. I'm like, the dude asked for $5. Give him his $5. I guess I'm just an evil yard sale guy. That's all.
So, I mean, we're starting to run low on time here, but there's a big topic that I want to ask you, because you just said you were a big G.I. Joe guy.
Yes.
And I found out about this not too long ago, and it melted my brain.
Ooh.
Do you know about the Intruders?
The Intruders.
It's
not ringing an immediate bell, so go on.
Okay. It was just slightly before our time. This was like that weird period where they were transitioning from what the 12-inch figures were to the 3 1/4 figures that they released in the mid 80s. They were still 12-inch figures, but they had this idea that we should make like more G.I. Joes than the main guy, and there should be villains.
Okay. So, yeah.
The Intruders were a caveman. They were an alien caveman. I have no idea how the fuck that works, but that's what they were. And they were supposed to be what 2 G.I. Joe fought, and they were smaller, considerably smaller, just slightly bigger than the 3 1/4 figures. And I found a picture of this, and like, I had never seen this. I had no idea what I was looking at. And then I realized it was this bullet head G.I. Joe guy that was supposed to be G.I. Joe's partner.
The bullet head guy.
Yeah.
You're starting to ring a fake bell here.
This only flew for a couple of years when they were trying to find something else to do with the brand, because the 12 inches weren't working anymore.
Yep, I'm looking at it right now. Yep, there's the caveman guy. I pulled up on my phone. Gosh, yeah. I must have seen a YouTube thing on this years ago, because it's vague. I definitely remember the bullet head guy. I think I knew them as the Adventure Team.
Okay.
Um, and I think, okay, it's all coming together. I think my friend, acquaintance, the guy I know, Jim Beard, he writes a lot of books about GI Joe toys, and I want to say he wrote an adventure. Yeah, it was Jim. He wrote an Adventure Team GI Joe novel back when Amazon had. See if I can blow your mind again. Amazon had this thing called something Worlds. Amazon might have been Amazon Worlds, or basically here's the deal. You could write for a licensed property. You could write a book if they had, because you go to their site, Amazon Kindle Worlds. It might have been called Kindle Worlds. Anyway, they'd have a list of all these properties that you could write a book. You, me, anybody could write a book under this licensed property, and they would sell it and give you part of the profits because they'd already worked it out with Hasbro for the GI Joe license. And you pull it up and it tells you all the rules. Here's all the rules you have to follow. As long as you follow these rules, we're going to publish your book, and you get money, and Hasbro gets money, we get money, and everybody wins. And Jim wrote an Adventure Team book. There's a picture. You guys on listening can't see, but
I'm going to try to get this in the show notes.
So there's an Adventure Team book. Unfortunately, I heard they killed that project because I started writing my own Joe novel. I got about 4 or 5 chapters in, and then they killed. I think it was called Kindle Worlds. It's going to drive me nuts if I don't remember the exact name. And it made me so sad because I was like, oh man, I was in the middle of writing this book too, and I was looking forward to doing it. But they had so many cool properties that just Joe Schmo could go in there and write a novel under a license, and it was so cool.
Yeah. I can see that going south.
Yeah, it ended up. Maybe it didn't make enough money for them, and maybe the people ended up pulling the licenses. I don't know what happened, but I will tell you this part that you'll appreciate. I remember in all the rules that they had, you can't do this, you can't kill characters, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. For GI Joe, it specifically said Snake Eyes. It might have been any GI Joe character, but I know they specifically mentioned like Snake Eyes or any other GI Joe character will never wear any New York Yankees paraphernalia at any time. Because the founders of Hasbro are big Boston Red Sox fans. And that was a literal rule that they had put into writing their characters, that you can't be pro New York Yankees in any of their stuff. That cracked me up.
How many Apple devices do you have?
2.
Okay. Somewhere in the user license agreement that you signed when you plugged that thing in, you agreed not to use your Apple product to build nuclear weapons.
Oh, good.
Just keep that in mind, okay?
Oh, hang on. I got to cancel a couple of projects.
But it's funny. I'm wondering what they would have said about the way you portray the characters. Because the thing that blew my mind about the Intruders, even after I realized the weirdness of the characters, was that due to the height difference between the caveman and the GI Joe, and the caveman has these big circular arms.
Yeah.
And he's supposed to grab onto GI Joe. That's kind of his gimmick. But the height difference sets it up that it doesn't look like he's fighting him. It looks like they're, shall we say, snuggling.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll call that snug. And I'm just amazed that nobody at the toy company said, dial that back a minute. Okay, let's rethink that.
Yeah, I'm looking at this ad for it. The Adventure Team, ready to go whenever adventure leads, features Eagle Eye GI Joe, Atomic Man, Bullet Man, and the Intruders. Yep, there you have it. That's out of 1976 catalog. So yeah, late 70s in that weird bridge. I'm surprised they didn't talk a little more about that on the did you watch you must have, the Toys That Made Us on Netflix?
I've seen clips of it. It's been more of a time invest.
Definitely worth it, especially on the GI Joe. I found the GI Joe and the He-Man episodes particularly entertaining, but they're all wonderful. Highly recommend the Toys That Made Us. Good stuff. But they might have mentioned Bullet Man on there. I can't remember, but this definitely is an interesting era that doesn't get talked about enough.
I know, and I think that's probably somewhat on purpose because it didn't last long, and it was so weird that they're now just trying to bury it.
It's like that like 1989, 1990 He-Man. You remember that? Like where they tried to bring He-Man back and made it very like sci-fi.
Yeah, it was a Ninja Turtles clone at that point.
Yeah, well, everybody was chasing Ninja Turtles at that point.
Yeah, and not can't blame them for that.
Exactly. You know, like as a GI Joe 3 3/4 inch collector, you know, a lot of people really poo-poo those later 80, 89, 90 run. Well, everything got bright and colorful and toxic and hazardous waste, and it was like, well, everybody was chasing the turtles. It was all about being like the turtles at that point.
Yeah.
Eco warriors.
I didn't think those were, I mean, granted, I was kind of getting out of G.I. Joe at that point, so maybe it was turning me off. But looking back, I don't see a problem with those. I see that era like at the late 90s where they tried to do a slight redesign of the figure, but roughly the same scale, the G.I. Joe Extreme or whatever it was. That just seemed to be the worst of both worlds to me.
Yeah, the G.I. Joe Extreme and the Sergeant Savage lines. You know, they were in that sort of like, they were just kind of trying to find their footing. And the funny part is that GI Joe really kind of had its best comeback around 2000, and all they really did was new molds for the old figures and basically just re-embraced what it was to begin with. And it got popular again around 2000, and then kind of fades out. It kind of fades in and out and in and out over time. And right now we're at it back at an end phase because they've re-released, well, not re-released, but they did sort of those little very retro looking package 3 3/4 inch Joes, which I can never find. Everybody posts them on Twitter and they're never at my local Walmart, which makes me mad. And then they've got those what about 5-inch now, the classified figures that are super cool looking, that have sort of really re-energized the collector community.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to checking out some of those because haven't jumped on the Joe bandwagon yet, but the day is still young.
Yeah, there's time. I was just fortunate for last Father's Day and Christmas. Those were kind of the big things that my wife had hunted down for me, was the 5-inch classified. So I have a fair amount of those, and those are super cool. For some reason, they're easier to find at Target. I wonder if Target has the exclusive. I've never seen them at Walmart, but we do come across them at Targets. So of course, there's always online, Big Bad Toy Store and all those places.
Well, Jarrod, I've got to let you go, but I want to give you a chance to plug any of your shows. Where can we find you? Keep tabs on your writing, your adventures, your art.
Oh, I appreciate it. You know, first of all, the best place to do that is on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. They're all at Yard Sale Artists. So by all means, give me a follow. I'm a big follow back guy. So at Yard Sale Artists is the best place to find me for my art, writing, comic book creating, and yard sale adventures. That's pretty much all I tweet about. And then as far as podcasts go, I would definitely encourage you. We already talked about On Her Majesty's Secret podcast if you're into James Bond. Otherwise, I'm on a ton of shows on the Longbox Crusade network. That's at Longbox Crusade, or if you point your podcatcher to Longbox Crusade, you will find us. We cover a lot of stuff about comic books. We have a show about action films. We have a show about old TV serials, movies, all old forgotten black and white stuff. For example, we're currently going through the 1943 Batman serial and the 1954 Sherlock Holmes TV show. So we like to find really cool things that people have kind of forgotten about and bring them back. But anyway, comic books, that kind of stuff, action films, that's all over at Longbox Crusade. Check us out. All
right. Well, thanks so much for being here, and I hope to have you back soon.
Oh man, I really enjoyed this, and I'd love to be back soon.